Thank you, William. As I've been sitting listening to the talks that have been absolutely fantastic and interesting, I couldn't help notice that Ben and William and I are wearing blue jeans and blue shirts, and it hasn't been pre-arranged that way. It's just a happy coincidence. So as William said, I'm the Planning and Advocacy Manager at Suffolk Wildlife Trust. I joined in 2021 to lead on the Trust's work influencing the policies and plans and decision-making that affects nature, which has really been identified as a high priority for the Trust, because as Ben and Alice and William have all said, we can't achieve the things that we're trying to for nature in Suffolk on our own. It's about collaboration, working together and influencing others as well. And my job really is to make the case for nature and why we need to protect it and restore it to the people who are in a position to make those policies and plans and decisions that have such wide-ranging impact. And in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the ways that we are, I haven't even got onto my first slide yet, using our voice for nature. And hopefully leave you feeling empowered and optimistic about the impact that we can have by speaking together for nature. So I'd like to start by taking us back to June 2024 and the Restore Nature Now March in London, which feels like a lifetime ago. This was just before the general election last year. 60,000 people walked to Westminster all together to call on every political party to commit to protecting and restoring nature in their election manifestos. And Suffolk Wildlife Trust were there, staff, volunteers, members, maybe some of you in the room today. And those political parties listened. And when Labour won that general election last year, they did so having made promises to protect and restore nature and deliver on the UK's environmental commitments in the Environment Act. And that was a fantastic thing to be able to achieve collectively, not just as Suffolk Wildlife Trust and with you, our members and supporters, but as a movement. It showed how important looking after nature is to people in this country. And I think it's worth noting that, our 27,000 strong membership is part of a wider movement of the Wildlife Trusts, a federation of 46 local wildlife trusts with a combined membership of 1 million people, and part of a much bigger movement, much bigger than the membership of any one political party. So support for nature is something that cuts across party politics, but it is political because policies and plans and decisions affect nature. So after the general election, we got Chris out, put her to work, walking around, meeting our new MPs in the places that are the best places to advocate for nature. And those are the places like our nature reserves where you can see and smell and hear and feel what nature is all about and why it's important to people. And I'm not going to ask people to shout out which nature reserves those are. But I will say that sites like Blackbourne Valley and the wilding of the former sort of arable farmland there, Carlton Marshes and the fantastic wetland restoration that's taken place there just on the edge of Lowestoft, and Martlesham Wilds that we're going to be hearing a bit more about later today. They're not only sort of exceptional examples of how we can bring nature back in the landscape, they do a fantastic job of showing the benefits that process can bring to people and communities, and the wider environmental benefits that can deliver, and how restoring nature contributes to sort of social value and economic value as well. And as we walked around these sites with our MPs, we were able to help them understand, why restoring nature is so important and help them to get it. And they do, and they did. But that hasn't stopped nature from facing some significant challenges this year. And I think it's true to say that this isn't the first time that a government has taken aim at nature and the protections that are in place for nature. So earlier this year, bats and newts especially kind of came under fire from the Treasury and Number 10, and the protections that nature has were painted as obstacles to growth and development. And successive governments have sort of seen nature protections as a bit of a soft target and under pressure to deregulate and support growth and, in their words, sort of unshackle the economy. They have, in various ways, sought to sort of remove or water down those protections. But we know that the way that nature has been characterized in the last year by some people is not true at all. We know that nature isn't a blocker of growth or development. And the reason we know that is that there is evidence to show that that's not the case. So wilder ecology, our Suffolk Wildlife Trust consultancy did some research earlier this year for a report for the Wildlife Trust that showed that actually only 3% of planning appeals, so those are planning applications that are refused and then challenged, go to appeal, only 3% of those mentioned bats or newts. So clearly bats and newts are not the thing that is stopping development from happening. We know that Natural England only object to 1% of planning applications. And we also know from various studies as well, from the construction and development industry itself, that nature is not the thing that is holding up development. It's structural issues with the house building sector, the construction industry, and other issues with the planning system, not nature. But that didn't stop government from introducing earlier this year the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, which was sold as delivering win-wins for nature and growth. And in particular, Part 3 of this bill introduced kind of quite sweeping changes to the way that impacts on nature were treated in the planning system. And far from being a win-win for nature, we know that the changes that were proposed when the bill was introduced would have significantly weakened protections for nature in a way that threatened some of our most important sites for nature, those protected by the habitats regulations, potentially kind of threatened irreplaceable habitats that simply can't be replaced once they're lost. And thanks to the fact that we had met with our new MPs earlier in the year, we were able to speak to them about our concerns about the impacts of the Planning and Infrastructure Bill on nature here in Suffolk, and using some of the examples of the sites that we had taken them to and shown them, which are so important for nature, we were able to help them understand why the proposals in the Planning and Infrastructure Bill were so damaging and what we needed to do to change that. And again, we rolled Chris out, and this time we were able to meet a group of our MPs down in Westminster and sit around a table with them and discuss our concerns. And we had our work cut out, I have to say. You know, we met with Labour MPs from Norfolk and Suffolk. Next to Chris, there is Elliot, who's the CEO at Norfolk Wildlife Trust. And Labour MPs had been whipped, not literally, by the government to support the planning and infrastructure bill. So, and they'd been sold the narrative of how fantastic this bill was going to be for growth and nature. So helping them to understand why that wasn't the case was a difficult job. But we were able to do it, again, using evidence and our experience of what nature needs. We were able to help them understand that, you know, some habitats simply can't be replaced if you've lost them. And we were able to convince some of our Labour MPs to introduce amendments to the bill that would support safeguards for nature to address some of the issues with the bill that we were worried about. And I do need to give a shout out to Jenny Riddle-Carpenter, who's the MP for Suffolk Coastal, because she worked with us to introduce some positive amendments for nature, including requirements for developers to include wildlife features like swift bricks and bat boxes in new development. Unfortunately, the government decided to vote down all of the positive nature amendments that were tabled by MPs. Jenny took, I think, the very brave stance of abstaining from voting on some of the nature amendments in the bill in the face of huge pressure from government to support it. So I'd like to thank her for that. I should also say that Adrian Ramsey, Green MP for Waveney Valley, also supported those nature amendments as well. But government didn't listen. And in response, the Wildlife Trusts, RSPB, other environmental organisations moved to calling for Part 3 of the bill to be scrapped entirely. If the government weren't willing to change Part 3 of the bill to prevent it from being bad for nature and weakening environmental protections, we thought it just needs to be removed entirely. And more than 1,000 of our members and supporters and people in Suffolk sent messages to their MPs, to the Secretary of State, supporting that call to remove Part 3. And this is just one of the messages that one of our members sent to their MP, which I think, for me, shows the power and strength of feeling that there is for nature among Suffolk Wildlife Trust members and supporters. If you recognise this message as your own, thank you. Please do come and speak to me in the coffee break. So, once the bill got to the House of Lords, the government actually conceded to introduce their own amendments to the bill to address some of the concerns that we in the Office for Environmental Protection, the government's watchdog on the environment, agreed needed to be made to the bill to prevent it from weakening our existing nature protections. And I think that's largely thanks to the strength of feeling and the groundswell of support for nature and the calls to change the bill to protect it that the Wildlife Trusts and Suffolk Wildlife Trust and our members and supporters were a part of. So thank you very much. Now, it's not over yet. The Planning and Infrastructure Bill is still going through Parliament. It's in the House of Lords at the moment. More amendments are being considered in the House of Lords, and there are still things that we need to do to improve the bill and make sure that it's not going to be damaging for nature. And we're continuing to push for those changes. And this is just one of the ways that we've been using our collective voice to stand up for and speak up for nature over the last year. You, our members and supporters, have also supported campaigns for maintaining the ban on neonic pesticides. which was successful earlier this year. The government upheld that ban. You have more than 200 people, members and supporters, responded to a consultation on biodiversity net gain. The government was proposing to reduce the number of developments that would be required to improve nature. And more than 200 people responded to a really actually quite technical consultation to say, no, you mustn't do that. We need all developments to be delivering improvements for nature. You have supported campaigns to call for a ban on bottom trawling in all marine protected areas that are designated for their seabed habitats. So we are collectively really using our voice for nature effectively. And looking forward, with the election of a Norfolk and Suffolk mayor in May 2026, which is going to be happening as part of the English devolution process and the formation of a strategic authority for Suffolk and Norfolk. We have a real opportunity there to influence the priorities and functions of that mayor and strategic authority to be better for nature. So that mayor will have responsibility for things like strategic planning and transport and infrastructure and nature recovery. So that we want to see a mayor for nature for Norfolk and Suffolk. And with your help and support and with using our voice for nature effectively and speaking for nature and getting political for nature as well, not political in a party political sense, but making sure that nature is a priority in policy making, we can achieve that positive aspiration for nature in Suffolk. So thank you very much. That's me done.